The room fell silent as Commander Abigail Hayes walked to the center of the circular chamber. Hundreds of alien eyes watched her from their elevated seats. The Galactic Council meeting hall was designed to make speakers feel small, and today, it was working. Abigail straightened her blue uniform jacket and looked up at the semicircle of alien representatives. After 3 years as Earth's lead diplomat to the Council, she knew most of them by name. Some were friends. Others were definitely not. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice clear and strong despite her exhaustion. "For the 6th time this year, I stand before you with evidence of the Void Swarm's approach toward populated systems." She gestured, and the holographic display behind her lit up with sensor readings, trajectory plots, and images from deep space probes. The data was irrefutable. A massive biological entity was moving through the outer reaches of the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. "The swarm has increased speed by 22% since our last warning," she continued. "At current velocity, it will reach the Mindari homeworld in 4 months, not 6 as previously estimated." From his seat near the back of the human delegation, Major Daniel Lewis watched the council members' reactions. Most showed the same bored expressions they'd worn during the previous 5 briefings. A few looked concerned, but they were the ones who always looked concerned. The ones who mattered, the representatives of the powerful Zorlath and Vespidi empires, were whispering to each other and not even pretending to pay attention. High Counselor Zivak of the Vespidi raised a slender, 3-fingered hand. His exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber lights. "Commander Hayes," he said, his translator giving his voice a metallic quality. "We have heard these warnings before. Each time, your predicted disaster fails to materialize as described." Abigail kept her face neutral. "The disaster hasn't happened yet because the swarm hasn't reached populated space. But it's coming. The evidence is circumstantial at best," interrupted Ambassador Krax of the Zorlath hierarchy. His massive form shifted as he leaned forward. "These readings could be interpreted many ways. Natural stellar phenomena, or perhaps even sensor malfunctions." Abigail felt her patience wearing thin. "With respect, Ambassador, we've ruled out those possibilities. 17 different sensor arrays from 3 different species all show the same thing. Humans are known for their vivid imaginations," Zivak said, drawing chuckles from several delegates. "Your species' cultural transmissions are full of invented threats from beyond the stars. Perhaps you see what you expect to see." Daniel watched. Abigail's shoulders tense. He knew that look. In their private strategy sessions, they had discussed this exact scenario, what they would do if the council refused to listen one more time. "We are not imagining this," Abigail said firmly. "The Void Swarm is real, it is coming, and we need a unified response. Earth has already begun building defenses and weapons, but we need the Council's resources and coordination if we're going to protect the galaxy." Krax made a dismissive gesture. "Earth has been in space for barely a century. The Zorlath have traveled the stars for 50,000 years. If this threat were real, we would have detected it first. Perhaps your instruments aren't calibrated to detect biological entities of this nature," suggested Lieutenant Grace Hoffman from the human delegation. As their xenobiologist, she had been studying the limited samples they'd managed to collect from the swarm's outer tendrils. Ambassador Pelk of the Mindari, one of the few who seemed genuinely concerned, spoke up. "The Mindari would like to review the human data in more detail. If our world is truly the first in the swarm's path, the Council will not be driven to panic by unverified human theories," Zivak cut in. "We have real matters to discuss today, including trade route allocations and colonial expansion rights." Abigail looked back at her team. Daniel gave her a slight nod. They had prepared for this moment for weeks, hoping it wouldn't come to this. Ambassador Patrick Green, their senior diplomat, looked grim but nodded as well. Colonel Alan Reeves, their military advisor, had advocated for this approach from the beginning. Abigail turned back to face the council. The chamber quieted, perhaps sensing the shift in her demeanor. "High Counselor," she said, addressing Zivak directly, "when Earth joined this council, we were told that all members' concerns would be given fair consideration. We were told that the safety of all sentient life was the Council's highest priority. And, so it is, Zivak replied smoothly, but we must be guided by facts, not fears. The facts are in the data we've provided, Abigail said. Data you've dismissed without proper review. We've followed every protocol, submitted every required form, waded through every delay. Meanwhile, the threat grows closer. She paused, looking around the chamber. Humanity cannot wait any longer. We will not stand by while bureaucracy prevents action. Therefore, I am authorized to inform you that as of this moment, Earth formally withdraws from these proceedings. A shocked murmur ran through the chamber. This was unprecedented. Member species might abstain from votes or skip meetings, but formal withdrawal during active session was considered a grave diplomatic insult. Commander Hayes, Zivak said, his voice sharp with warning, consider carefully what you are doing. We have considered, High Counselor, for 3 years we have considered while you ignored our warnings. Ambassador Green stood and joined Abigail at the center of the chamber. He held up a data crystal, their formal petition for emergency action, then deliberately dropped it on the floor. The small clink echoed in the suddenly silent room. Earth will face this threat with or without Council support, Green said. We had hoped for better from the supposed greatest minds in the galaxy. One by one, the human delegation rose from their seats. Colonel Reeves moved to Abigail's side, followed by Daniel and the others. You are making a grave error. Cracks rumbled. No single species can stand apart from the Council and prosper. Perhaps, Abigail answered, but we can't stand with a Council that won't even acknowledge a threat to our existence. As they walked toward the chamber exit, Grace Hoffman whispered, Abby, are we making a terrible mistake? Colonel Reeves answered before Abigail could. The mistake would be wasting more time here while the swarm gets closer. From his seat, Ambassador Pelk of the Mindari watched the humans leave with growing dread. His world was directly in the path of this void swarm, if it existed. He made a mental note to contact the human delegation privately later. As the doors closed behind them, Abigail felt a weight lift from her shoulders, quickly replaced by a new, heavier burden. They were on their own now. Well, Daniel said quietly as they walked down the corridor toward their ship. That could have gone better. Abigail's lips quirked in a small, humorless smile. It went exactly as expected. Now the real work begins. In the council chamber, the representatives stared at the closed doors. Then they did what they always did. They moved on to the next item on the agenda, already forgetting about the humans and their wild claims about some approaching threat. They would remember this moment later. By then, it would be too late. 6 months had passed since the humans walked out of the Galactic Council. Earth had not been idle during this time. Admiral Samantha Collins stood at the viewport of the orbital defense platform Aegis, watching Earth rotate slowly below. The blue-green planet looked peaceful from up here. Its people were not. Admiral, the War Cabinet is assembled, said her aide, Lieutenant Frank Wilson. Samantha nodded and turned away from the view. The circular meeting room was already filled when she entered. Faces looked up at her, some tired, some determined, all serious. Let's begin, she said, taking her seat at the head of the table. Dr. Mendoza, update on the Void Swarm's movements. Dr. Keith Mendoza stood and activated the holographic display in the center of the table. A 3-dimensional map of nearby star systems appeared, with a large red mass slowly moving through it. The news isn't good, Keith said, his voice grim. The swarm has accelerated again. Our deep space probes confirm it's moving 20% faster than last month. He pointed to a blue star on the map. They'll reach Mindari space within 3 weeks. Murmurs filled the room. The Mindari had been one of the few council species to take the human warning seriously, though not seriously enough to oppose the council's decision. And the council core worlds? Samantha asked. 3 months after that, assuming the swarm maintains its current course and speed. Samantha turned to Dr. Olivia Carter, who sat with dark circles under her eyes. The weapons? Olivia straightened in her chair. The quantum disruptors are ready for full deployment. We've retrofitted 80% of the fleet, and the remaining ships should be equipped within 2 weeks. She paused. But Admiral, we haven't had a chance to test them against actual swarm tissue. The simulations look promising, but we'll find out soon enough if they work, Samantha said. She looked around the table. What's the status of our allies? Benjamin Drake, their diplomatic officer, cleared his throat. The Mindari are preparing as best they can, but their military is small. They've asked if we can provide ships to help defend their homeworld. And the Council? Samantha asked. Benjamin's expression darkened. Still debating. I've maintained back channels with sympathetic representatives. They tell me that Zivak and Krax are finally admitting there might be a threat, but they're arguing about proper response protocols and committee jurisdictions. He shook his head. They're finally scared, but they're still not acting. Colonel Alan Reeves, who had been at the council walkout 6 months earlier, snorted. Typical. By the time they finish their debates, the swarm will be eating their chamber. Samantha held up a hand. We knew this would happen. That's why we've been preparing on our own. She turned to her fleet commander. Captain Gregory Howard, what's our force readiness? Gregory stood tall and serious. Every available ship has been recalled and retrofitted. The Mars shipyards are working at maximum capacity on the new dreadnoughts. Engineers Jason Miller and Diane Powell report the ESS Defiance will be ready for launch in 10 days. Will it be enough? Someone asked from the end of the table. Silence fell over the room. It was the question they all asked themselves every day. Samantha looked each person in the eye before answering. It will have to be. Humanity has always excelled when backed into a corner. She stood. We knew the council wouldn't listen until it was too late. We've had 6 months of preparation they didn't use. That's our advantage. As the meeting broke up, Daniel Lewis, now Captain Lewis since his promotion, approached Samantha. He had been on the original council delegation with Commander Hayes. Any word from Abigail? He asked quietly. Samantha nodded. She's on her way back from the Mindari homeworld now. Their premier finally agreed to a formal alliance. Without council approval? That's a big step for them. Fear is a powerful motivator, Samantha said. Speaking of which, I need you to take the interceptor to the outer defense perimeter. We've got strange readings from Beacon Station Delta. Daniel's expression turned serious. Swarm scouts? Maybe. Take Dr. Hoffman with you. If it is the swarm, we need samples. Later that day, on the other side of Earth's moon, Dr. Olivia Carter watched as technicians loaded the last quantum disruptor cannon onto the frigate ESS Horizon. The weapon was her creation, 3 years of research and development, compressed into 6 frantic months of production. Will it work? Asked a voice. Behind her, Olivia turned to see Commander Abigail Hayes, recently returned from her Mindari mission. She looked tired but determined. In theory, yes, Olivia answered honestly. The quantum signature of the swarm's cell structure should be vulnerable to targeted disruption at this frequency. Abigail nodded. She didn't pretend to understand the science, but she trusted Olivia. The Mindari are counting on us. Their defenses won't hold for long. I know. Olivia watched as the loading bay doors closed. How bad was it seeing the council representatives again? Awkward, Abigail admitted. But the Mindari premier was clear. They believe us now, even if they can't say so publicly. They've quietly moved most of their civilian ships to their colony worlds, just in case. Smart, Olivia said. I wish the other species would do the same. They still trust the council. Abigail's voice was bitter. Even with the swarm practically on their doorstep, they still think the mighty Galactic Council will protect them. Before Olivia could respond, both their communicators beeped with an urgent signal. They looked at the message, then at each other. Captain Lewis has found something, Abigail said. The interceptor is engaging unknown biological entities at the edge of the solar system, Olivia read from her screen. Her hands trembled slightly. It's starting. Across the solar system, humanity braced itself. Emergency broadcasts advised citizens to remain calm but prepared. Underground shelters built over the past 6 months were checked and stocked. Military reserves were called up. Earth's orbital defense grid, expanded and strengthened since the council walkout, hummed with power as weapon systems came online. At 2, Mars Command, Admiral Collins received the first images from the Interceptor's battle. The enemy didn't use ships as humans understood them. They were biological constructs, massive living vessels that seemed part plant, part animal, part something, entirely alien. "Send reinforcements to the Interceptor," she ordered, "and contact the Mindari. Tell them." She paused, the weight of command heavy on her shoulders. "Tell them the Void Swarm has arrived earlier than we predicted. Their homeworld has 3 weeks at most." As her officers rushed to obey, Samantha looked at the images again. The swarm creatures were horrible but not unstoppable. Humanity had prepared as best they could. Now they would find out if it was enough. The Mindari homeworld was beautiful from orbit. Its oceans were purple instead of blue, and its continents were covered with golden vegetation. Now that beauty was marred by the dark shapes of void swarm vessels descending through the atmosphere. The AO swarm had arrived 3 days earlier than even the updated human projections. The token defensive fleet sent by the Galactic Council had crumbled within hours. On the bridge of the ESS Interceptor, Captain Daniel Lewis watched the tactical display with growing concern. His ship had arrived with the first wave of human vessels, responding to the Mindari distress call. What they found was worse than expected. "Status report," Daniel ordered, his voice steady, despite the chaos unfolding around them. 5 swarm hive ships in orbit," replied his tactical officer. "Each one is launching hundreds of smaller attack creatures. The Mindari orbital defenses are at 30% and failing." Daniel made a decision that would change galactic history. "Communications send to all human vessels. Move to defensive positions around Mindari Prime. Weapons hot. We stand with our allies." The ragtag human flotilla, 17 ships of various sizes that had been close enough to respond quickly, moved into formation. They were the only thing standing between the Void Swarm and millions of Mindari civilians. "Sir," said the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from a council representative." Daniel nodded. On screen, the face of Ambassador Cracks appeared. The Zorlath looked shocked, his normally imposing presence diminished by fear. "Captain Lewis, the council orders you to withdraw human forces immediately." "This is a council matter. With respect, Ambassador." Daniel cut him off. "The council had its chance. You're watching from your safe core worlds while the Mindari die. We're staying." He signaled to cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "Launch all fighters. Prepare the quantum disruptors." Lieutenant Commander Nicole Davis led the fighter squadrons out of the Interceptor's bay. Her hands were steady on the controls as she addressed her pilots. "Stay in formation. These aren't ships like we're used to. They're biological entities. Aim for what look like sensory clusters or propulsion nodes. And remember, the quantum disruptors are untested in combat. Call out your results." The human fighters engaged the first wave of swarm creatures, things that looked like giant insects mixed with jellyfish, each the size of a small shuttle. When the first quantum disruptor beam hit one of the creatures, it seemed to shudder, then break apart into unconnected cellular matter. "It works," shouted one of the pilots. "The disruptors work." Nicole allowed herself a brief smile before diving back into the fight. "All fighters, prioritize your disruptor shots, standard weapons for cleanup." In orbit and on the ground, humans fought alongside the overwhelmed Mindari defense forces. Major Ryan Kelly led a marine extraction team to the surface, their dropships dodging swarm attackers to reach the capital city. "Move, move, move!" Ryan shouted as his marines deployed from the ships. Their mission was to evacuate Mindari government, officials, and as many civilians as possible. The streets of the Mindari capital were chaos. The elegant buildings with their spiral designs were burning or broken. Swarm creatures, smaller versions of the space-based attackers, moved through the city, capturing or killing any Mindari they found. Ryan's team linked up with a group of Mindari soldiers who were protecting a school. The alien defenders looked at the humans with surprise and relief. "We didn't think anyone would come," said the Mindari captain, his translator giving his words a musical quality. "We keep our promises," Ryan replied. Even when the Council doesn't, what's the situation? The Mindari explained that thousands of civilians were gathered in underground shelters throughout the city. They needed time to evacuate to the spaceport where human transports could take them to safety. We'll give you that time, Ryan promised. He turned to his Marines. Defensive perimeter, nothing gets through. When the swarm attackers came, the combined human Mindari force was ready. The Marines' heavy weapons tore through the first wave. The Mindari's energy weapons were less effective but still helpful. It was the portable quantum disruptors, however, that made the real difference. They don't like that, said Marine Sergeant Eric Powell as he watched a swarm creature dissolve after being hit. Dr. Carter deserves a medal for these. The battle for the capital raged for hours. Slowly, the defenders pushed back the swarm, long enough for convoys of civilians to reach the spaceport. Human transports, protected by fighter escorts, made run after run from the surface to waiting ships in orbit. On the command ship ESS Guardian, which had arrived with the second wave of human forces, Communications Officer Jack Peterson intercepted panicked Council transmissions. "Sir," he reported to Admiral Samantha Collins, who had taken personal command of the relief fleet, "the Council is requesting immediate human assistance for all border worlds. They're offering technology transfers, trade concessions, anything. We want." Samantha's expression was grim as she watched the battle displays. 3 human ships had already been lost and many more damaged. "Tell them we're a little busy saving the allies they abandoned. They'll have to wait their turn." She turned to her tactical officer. "Status of the quantum disruptors?" "They're effective, Admiral, but we don't have enough. The swarm adapts quickly. They're already developing thicker outer membranes to resist the disruption effect." Samantha nodded. This was expected. No weapon stayed effective forever. "Tell Dr. Carter. She'll need to start working on modifications." Back on the surface, Major Kelly's team had reached the Mindari Premier's compound. The elegant building was partly collapsed, but sensors detected life signs inside. "Premier Telex," Ryan called over the communication system they'd established. "We're here to evacuate you and your staff." The Premier himself appeared at a doorway, helped by 2 aides. His normally pristine robes were torn and stained. "Major Kelly," he said, recognizing Ryan from previous diplomatic meetings. "Your commander, Hayes, said humans would come if we needed help. I didn't fully believe her." "Commander Hayes is on her way with the 3rd wave," Ryan said, as his team secured the area. "But we need to get you to safety now." As they escorted the Premier toward an extraction point, he asked, "Why did you come?" "After how the Council treated your people." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Because it was the right thing to do." In orbit, the battle had reached a critical point. The human fleet was holding its own, but just barely. The quantum disruptors were making a difference, but there were simply too many swarm vessels. Then a communication came through on all channels. It was being broadcast across the entire galactic communication network, on screens throughout the fleet, throughout the Council worlds, and on Earth itself. Real-time footage showed human soldiers fighting alongside Mindari defenders. It showed human ships putting themselves between swarm attackers and civilian evacuation vessels. It showed the sacrifice and courage of a species that had every reason to say, "We told you so," and stay home. In the Council chamber, the representatives watched in stunned silence. The Zorlith ambassador, who had been loudest in dismissing human concerns, couldn't look away from the screen showing a human pilot deliberately ramming her damaged fighter into a swarm creature that was about to breach a civilian transport. "They're fighting for us," someone whispered. "After everything we said, everything we did." Back on the command ship, Admiral Collins received the message that would give the defenders hope. "3rd wave incoming. Commander Hayes sends her regards. A fresh fleet of human ships led by the newly completed dreadnought ESS Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Mindari system. The battle was far from over, but humanity had made its point. They would not abandon their allies, even those who had abandoned them. 2 weeks of brutal fighting had left the human fleet bloodied but standing. The battle for Mindari Prime had been won, though at terrible cost. Nearly 40% of Earth's combat vessels had been destroyed or badly damaged. The ground fighting, had claimed thousands of human and Mindari lives, but millions of civilians had been saved. More importantly, the Void Swarm's advance had been checked for the first time since it entered the galaxy. Admiral Samantha Collins stood in the virtual meeting space, her holographic form projected into the emergency Galactic Council session. Her uniform was wrinkled, and dark circles showed under her eyes. She hadn't slept properly in days. Around her, the representatives of 24 alien species watched with a mixture of fear, respect, and shame. High Counselor Zivak called the meeting to order. "Admiral Collins," he began, his voice lacking its usual condescension. "The Council formally acknowledges Earth's decisive action in defense of the Mindari systems. Without human intervention, we now understand the losses would have been total." Samantha didn't acknowledge the compliment. "The swarm has been pushed back temporarily. Our projections show they will regroup and attack again within 10 days. This time, they'll target multiple systems simultaneously." Ambassador Krax of the Zorlath shifted uncomfortably. "We have authorized our full military forces to engage the threat." "Too little, too late," Samantha replied coldly. "But we'll take whatever help we can get." "What do you propose?" asked a Vespidi representative. Samantha's expression remained grim as she outlined terms. "The combined fleets will follow human command structure. Your scientists will work alongside ours. No more committees, no more debates." Murmurs of protest rose from several representatives, but they died quickly. The footage from Mindari Prime of human ships and soldiers fighting and dying to protect aliens who had dismissed them had been seen throughout galactic civilization. "We agree to your terms," Zivak said finally. "The Council yields operational authority to Earth Command for the duration of this crisis." Within days, human battle groups were dispersed throughout Allied fleets. Experienced officers took command of mixed-species armadas despite the lingering resentment of some alien captains. Captain Lisa Garrison found herself leading a task force of 30 vessels, only 5 of them human. Her flagship, the ESS Valiant, had survived the battle at Mindari with moderate damage. Now repaired, it led a defensive formation around the Proxima colony, one of the likely next targets for the swarm. "Status report," Lisa ordered as she entered the bridge. "All ships in position," reported her executive officer. "The Zorlath Dreadnought is still complaining about taking orders from a human vessel, but they're complying." Lisa nodded. That was better than she'd expected. "Any sign of swarm activity?" "Nothing yet, Captain, but our long-range sensors show disturbances in the nearby nebula. They could be hiding there, building numbers." Lisa studied the tactical display. The nebula was a problem. Its energetic particles interfered with sensors. The swarm could be gathering an entire invasion force inside it, and they wouldn't know until it emerged. "Send a scout." "But not one of ours," she decided. "Ask the Vespidi to provide a stealth craft. Their sensor-shrouding technology is better suited for the nebula." The Vespidi captain agreed without argument. Another surprise. The battle at Mindari had changed things. Species that had looked down on humans now listened when they spoke. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Dr. Olivia Carter worked alongside alien scientists in a hastily established joint research facility. The quantum disruptors had proven effective, but as Samantha had predicted, the swarm was already adapting. "The problem is here," Olivia explained to her team, pointing to data on a large screen. "The swarm's outer membrane has changed its quantum resonance frequency. Our disruptors aren't as effective anymore." A Vespidi quantum theorist named Tishal studied the data. "Perhaps if we modulated the frequency, create a cycling pattern that the swarm cannot adapt too quickly." Olivia nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly what I was thinking. We'll need to modify the emitter arrays." "The Zorlath foundries could produce new emitters within days," offered another scientist. "Our manufacturing capacity exceeds Earth's. This kind of cooperation would have been unthinkable weeks earlier." The shared threat had created an unlikely alliance. On the front lines, the first coordinated attacks came sooner than expected. The Void Swarm struck at 3 systems simultaneously: Proxima Colony, Tau Ceti, and the Zorlath border world of Krell. At Proxima, Captain Garrison's mixed fleet engaged the swarm in orbit, while ground forces prepared for inevitable landings. Among those ground forces was Sergeant Eric Powell, who found himself leading a mixed squad of human Marines and Zorlath warriors. "They're coming in fast," Eric warned, as his team took defensive positions around a power distribution center. "Remember, they'll target infrastructure first. Don't let them near the power relays." The massive Zorlath warrior beside him, named Gorn, hefted a heavy weapon. "These creatures will learn to fear both human and Zorlath steel." Eric smiled despite the tension. A month ago, the Zorlath had considered humans barely worth acknowledging. Now they fought side by side. When the swarm attackers came, they came in waves. Living weapons of various shapes and sizes, each evolved for a specific purpose. Some flew, others crawled or slithered. All were deadly. "Hold the line," Eric shouted as his team engaged the first wave. Human pulse rifles fired alongside Zorlath energy cannons. The modified quantum disruptors, distributed to key defensive positions, proved their worth again. The battle raged for hours. Gradually, the defenders realized something important. They were winning. The coordination between species, each with different strengths and technologies, created a defense the swarm couldn't easily counter. In orbit, Lisa Garrison's fleet executed a brilliant flanking maneuver, catching a swarm hive ship between concentrated fire from human, Zorlath, and Vespidi vessels. When it broke apart, the smaller attackers became disorganized. "Press the advantage," Lisa ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup." Similar scenes played out across the three battlefields. The combined forces suffered losses, but nothing like what had happened at Mindari. The council species were learning from human tactics, and humans were utilizing alien technologies effectively. After the battles ended, the Zorlath ambassador requested a private meeting with UN Secretary Julia Martinez on Earth. In a conversation that would later become historic, the once arrogant representative admitted a profound error. "We mistook your preparation for paranoia, your caution for cowardice," he said solemnly. "It seems we were the naive ones." Secretary Martinez accepted the apology with grace. "What matters now is that we're fighting together." As reports came, and from the three successful defenses, Admiral Collins allowed herself the first real smile in weeks. The combined fleets had done more than just hold their ground. They'd pushed the swarm back. In her quarters aboard the command ship, she reviewed the next phase of the counteroffensive. Earth's newest vessels were coming online, equipped with improved weapons based on the joint research team's work. The Council worlds had committed their full industrial might to the war effort. For the first time, she felt a spark of real hope. The Void Swarm was still a terrible threat, but it was no longer facing divided, unprepared victims. It was facing a galaxy united by a common enemy, a unity that had begun when humans walked out of the Council chamber 6 months earlier. Sometimes, Samantha reflected, you had to leave the table to make others see your value. 3 months of coordinated warfare had pushed the Void Swarm back to the galactic fringe. The combined fleet, led by human admirals but crewed by members of every Council species, had won victory after victory. Each battle was hard fought, but the alliance grew stronger with each success. Now they faced the final confrontation at the Horsehead Nebula, where the swarm had retreated to rebuild its forces. Scientists had discovered something critical. The swarm had a central hive mind that coordinated all its biological vessels. Destroy that, and the threat might end forever. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history waited at the edge of the nebula. Over 2,000 ships from 27 species hung in the darkness of space. At their center was the ESS, Defender, Admiral Samantha Collins' flagship. On the bridge, Samantha stood before a holographic display showing the fleet formations. Behind her, Commander Abigail Hayes watched with a mixture of pride and disbelief. The woman who had walked out of the Council chamber in protest now stood at the heart of an unprecedented alliance. It's time, Samantha said. All ships, begin. Approach. Operation Firebreak is now active. Throughout the massive fleet, crews prepared for battle. The plan was complex but elegant. Multiple attack groups would create a diversion while a smaller strike force penetrated to the heart of the nebula, where the hive mind was hidden. Captain Daniel Lewis commanded that strike force from the ESS Interceptor. His small group of fast, heavily armed ships included vessels from the Mindari, Zorlath, and Vespidi fleets. Each had been specially equipped with the latest version of the quantum disruptors. "Strike team reporting ready, Admiral," Daniel said over the communication channel. "Good hunting, Captain," Samantha replied. "We'll keep them busy out here." As the main fleet engaged the outer defenses of the swarm, Daniel's team slipped through a gap in the enemy formation. The specialized sensors developed by the joint research teams helped them navigate through the nebula's interference. "Contact ahead," reported Lieutenant Nicole Davis, now serving as Daniel's tactical officer. Multiple swarm vessels guarding what appears to be a central structure. Daniel studied the readings. The structure was unlike any swarm vessel they'd encountered before. A massive, pulsating organism that seemed to be broadcasting signals to all other swarm entities. "That's it," he said. "The hive mind. All ships, engage according to plan. Remember, we need to get close enough for the disruptors to work at full power." The battle that followed was intense. The Guardian creatures fought with desperate ferocity, as if they understood the existential threat to their collective. 2 of Daniel's ships were lost in the initial exchange, but the remainder pressed forward. The ESS Interceptor took heavy damage as it drove toward the central organism. Systems failed across the ship, but the quantum disruptor remained operational. "We're within range," Nicole reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Disruptor at full charge." Daniel took a deep breath. "Fire." The enhanced quantum disruptor beam lanced out from the interceptor, joined seconds later by similar beams from the surviving strike team ships. Where they converged on the hive mind organism, reality itself seemed to warp as the quantum effect multiplied. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive creature began to convulse. Its outer membrane rippled and tore. Light burst from within it, growing brighter until sensors automatically dimmed to protect the crew's vision. "It's working," Nicole whispered. Throughout the nebula and beyond, every swarm entity suddenly froze. The giant biological ships attacking the main fleet stopped moving. The smaller attack creatures drifted aimlessly. "Strike team to Admiral Collins," Daniel reported, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "Target has been neutralized. Repeat, the hive mind is destroyed." A cheer went up across the communication channels. After months of desperate fighting, after years of warnings and preparation, the Void Swarm had been defeated. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council convened to discuss the future. The chamber that had once dismissed humanity now fell silent as Commander Abigail Hayes returned to address them. She stood at the same spot where, months earlier, she had announced humanity's withdrawal. "We didn't want to be right," she said, simply. "We never sought validation through catastrophe. We only wanted to be heard." High Counselor Zivak, who had once mocked human concerns, rose from his seat. "The Council acknowledges its error in judgment. Humanity's foresight saved us all from extinction. We owe you a debt that cannot be repaid." "Then don't try to repay it," Abigail suggested. "Instead, change how the Council operates. No species should be dismissed simply because they're newcomers. No warning should go uninvestigated because it's inconvenient." The Council unanimously passed reforms giving humanity equal standing despite their relative newcomer status. A new galactic defense force was established with Admiral Collins as its first supreme commander. In the council chambers where humanity once walked out, a memorial wall was installed, displaying the names of all who died defending the galaxy. Human names were interspersed with those of many alien species, a testament to shared sacrifice. On Earth, children learned about the Galaxy United in history classes. Schools across human territories added courses on alien cultures and languages. Meanwhile, on worlds throughout the Council, alien children studied human literature and philosophy, fascinated by the species that stood firm despite abandonment. 1 year after the final battle, Captain Daniel Lewis stood with Nicole Davis on the observation deck of the newly constructed Centauri station. Through the viewport, they could see ships from dozens of species docking and departing. "Hard to believe it's only been a year," Nicole said. Everything's changed. Daniel nodded. For the better, I think. At that moment, a group of Zorlath youth walked by, accompanied by their human teacher. The children were excitedly discussing their upcoming visit to Earth. Definitely for the better, Nicole agreed with a smile. 5 years after the victory, representatives from all council species arrived on Earth for the dedication of the Galactic Cooperation Center in Geneva. The Mindari ambassador presented a ceremonial gift to President Andrea Mitchell, a sculpture depicting human and alien hands clasped together, forged from metals contributed by every member world. The inscription read simply, "Together we stand. Never again alone." As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Lawrence Patel, historian at the new Galactic Academy on Luna, sat down to complete his definitive work on the Void Swarm War. His conclusion would be taught to students of all species for generations to come. When humans walked out of the council, both sides felt immediate regret. Humans regretted that unity had failed. The council regretted dismissing humanity's warnings. But from that moment of mutual regret emerged something stronger than either could have built alone: genuine respect. Sometimes the hardest path, walking away when no one will listen, leads to the most important destination of all. In her office overlooking the Geneva Lake, Commander Abigail Hayes, now Ambassador Hayes, read Dr. Patel's words and smiled. The journey had been painful, but the destination had been worth it. Humanity had found its place among the stars not by force, but by standing on principle. Sometimes you had to walk out to find your way home.